Welcome to our cozy cowl class. We're going to be crocheting a beautiful circular scarf. These are really fun. It's a great project. You only need to learn one crochet stitch to be able to have this nice little neck warmer that's perfect for the winter, perfect for a cozy little scene. So it's nice to wear under a big coat, or it's nice to wear in the office if the office you work in is super cold, which a lot of them are, right? Just throw this over top of whatever you're wearing and just add a little bit of extra homemade flair and also warmth, of course. So this is a project that I think we'll be able to get done in about an hour and a half or so. So our class is only an hour long, so we'll see how much of it we can get done. But once we learn the basics of how to do it, then we're just going to do a couple rows of the same thing. So if we don't get to finish all the rows together in class today, I'll definitely show you the ending of how to kind of finish it all off and have your cozy cowl. So this cowl circular scarf is what we're working on today. Let's switch over to the other camera and I'm going to show you the supplies that you need. So in today's class, there's really not a lot that you'll need. I'm going to be using this beautiful Sedona Sky is the name of this. It has beautiful oranges and teals and yellows. I really like this one. It's loops and thread and it's called Twisted Tones. So I have this color. I also have another one of the loops and threads twisted tones that I've been working on with these earthy colors too. But there are so many different choices. There's even some basics that have some little pops of like silver and gold in them. There's definitely some bright colors, but I'm kind of going for an earthy vibe with my cowl today. If you don't have the loops and thread two tones, another option for your yarn can be the Lion brand Wool Ease is another really good yarn for you to use. You only need one skein of whatever color you want, but you're always looking on your skein to find something that's super bulky, so like a 6 or a 7, and then it will tell you what hook size is recommended. So on this one, it says that the hook size recommended is an N, and we are going to be using an N today in class, which is a 10mm hook. And we're going to be learning some about crochet. So if you've never crocheted before, this might actually be a good beginner project because you just have that one double crochet stitch to learn and just a little bit with our patterns and we'll be good to go. So there are two PDFs that go along with this class. One is a very basic kind of pattern, says all the materials I just talked about, also talks about how tall it's going to be and how wide it's going to be, so you can adjust the pattern if you need it to be longer or higher or shorter or anything like that, and just some directions on the pattern itself. But then I also provided you with a little step out that I kind of created myself. So I didn't begin my crochet journey until very recently. And so I was still kind of learning myself and trying to figure out how to read these patterns. So I did a little step-by-step with hands and pictures. So if you're someone who might need a little bit more hand holding, literally there are hands with pictures that will kind of show and explain some of these steps that I'm going to be talking about. So the very first thing that we're going to do together, according to our pattern, is we are going to chain 60 stitches. And the 60 in this super weight 6 or 7 yarn using this N size hook is going to give us enough to be about 28 inches in circumference, which is a really nice cowl size. So it does have a little bit of a angle to it, because once we lay down our first set of stitches, it gets a little bit more narrow, but it also folds nicely on your neck when you actually put it on too. So this is what we're going to be doing with our double crochets and just a little bit of a pattern so that there is some movement with it. So here we go. We are going to learn how to do a slip knot. And if you have questions, if you are trying to work along with me and you need me to slow down or repeat something, I'm happy to do that. So there is a link for this pattern in the chat. And when this video shows up on YouTube, hopefully later on today, there'll also be the same link with these PDFs underneath the YouTube video as well. So I'm going to make a slip knot. Lots of ways to make a slip knot. This is just one option, but the option that I'm going to use is I'm going to be pointing my finger towards myself and I'm going to drape my yarn over my finger. And you'll notice that on this right-hand side is the tail, and on the left-hand side is the part that's attached to the skein, which is called the working yarn. I'm going to grab both of those, the tail and the working yarn, that's wrapped around my finger. And then I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to point it backwards. And what I'm doing is I'm twisting those yarns over top of each other. I'm going to reach in with my pincher fingers and I'm going to grab the working yarn. And that's one way to make a slip knot. So I'm going to show that again. I point my finger towards my belly. I drape my yarn so that I have my tail on the right side and my working yarn on the left. I twist my finger. I put my other finger into that loop, grab the working yarn, and pull it through, and now I have a slip knot. Now, what's great about a slip knot is that it opens and closes to be whatever size you want it to be. This is my end size hook. Right-handed, so most of what I'm going to be doing is right-handed. And then I'm going to be putting the yarn on my hand. Everybody holds their yarn and their hook differently when crocheting, so this is just one option that I'm showing you. But what I do is I drape it over my pinky, under my middle, my ring, over my middle, and around my pointer. So I go every other, and this creates tension. So if I push my fingers together, I can't pull the yarn through, but if I put my fingers apart, the yarn can go smoothly through. So think about it like the tension on a sewing machine. That's what this hand is doing. Here's my knot. My thumb is going to kind of keep track of this knot on the hook. And then I'm going to put my other thumb on the thumb pad of my hook. And in order to do a chain, my hook is going to go over the yarn and under. That's called a yarn over because the yarn just went over the hook. I'm going to pull this yarn through, and that's going to make my first chain. So I'll show that again. My hook goes over and under in order to yarn over. And I pull, so notice how I'm twisting my hook and kind of taking the hook and holding that yarn and getting that yarn to go through this loop underneath. So over, under, which is a yarn over, pulling through, and this is a chain. So every time you have a chain, it's made up of these stitches. Both of those V's coming together, both sides of the V make up one stitch. So I have 1, 2, 3 stitches so far. And in order to start, we need 60 stitches. So if you haven't ever learned a chain stitch before, you're about to do a whole lot of them, which is going to give you some good muscle memory in order to be able to create all 60. So keep track of your count, and I'm going to try and keep track of my count too. And I'm going to go to 60. Let me know in the chat if you need me to repeat anything, or if you have been crocheting for a long time, let me know that too, so I kind of know what skill level you guys have. And while I'm talking, I need to not lose track of my count. There we go. Okay. Okay, I'm halfway through, and there's a question in the chat asking to see the slip knot again, so I'm going to be able to show that. If you are still going with your 60, keep going. If you need help, let me know. So with my slip knot, my fingers pointing towards my belly, I draped my yarn so that I have yarn on my right-hand side is the tail, and on the left-hand side is my working yarn. Twist my finger. That makes the yarns cross over each other. And then I need to get my pinchers through that loop and grab the working yarn and pull through. And that's what makes my slip knot. So now that I have my slip knot, seems there's some people in our class today that are super new. So I'm so glad you're willing to try this. It's not easy. It's not easy. So here's a chain, what we're doing 60 of right now. I have my thumb on my thumb pad. And I'm going to take the hook and go over the yarn and under the yarn. That's how I wrap that yarn around my hook. I'm using the hook of my hook to grab the yarn, do its job, and it's going to try and pull it. So notice how with my thumb right here, I'm pinching the slip knot away from the hook. And the reason why I'm doing that is to leave a little bit of space so that I can pull the hook through that little bit of space. So I go over, under, and then I twist the hook in order to go through. And each time I do that, I count a stitch. And eventually you don't need to do the over under. Eventually you kind of know how to just yarn over and you'll get your style of doing it pretty quickly. But when you're first starting, if you've never done it before, think about your hook going over the yarn and under in order to grab it and pull it through. And each time you grab it and pull it through, you're making a new chain and you're trying to put all 60 of these into one big chain. So yeah, crocheting is a great skill. And once you learn some of the basics like chain stitching, what we're doing right now, and even one or two other stitches, there are so many things that you can create. So don't give up, keep trying, and you never know when you'll actually just feel like, how did I not know how to do this? I'm going to keep going up to 60. So you'll notice that my finger here is kind of keeping the tension. I hold my finger up so that it keeps some yarn here. Quiet because I'm counting. And if I do lose track of my count, I can always go back and look at my stitches. And each time you see a letter V with those two sides, that's a stitch. I'm getting close. Someone's trying to throw off the count in the chat. So I see some people saying they've never really worked a lot with this bulky yarn. And you're right. It is a little bit tougher to work with because it is so bulky. But what is also nice about it is that it works up very quickly. So like I said, I think this whole entire project is only going to take you about an hour and a half, whereas a lot of times scarves and things might take you a whole weekend when you have smaller chains and smaller yarns. So working with this thicker yarn is definitely going to get you there a lot quicker. So we're going to get pretty close to our 60. I'll give everybody kind of a second to catch up. And even if I go to the next step, I will come back and repeat it. So keep working on your chain. Make sure that you have your 60 stitches. Yeah. All right, I'm at 60. I use a J-hook a lot in the projects that I'm working on too. So yes, this is kind of different, getting used to a thicker yarn and a thicker hook for sure. So I'm going to go to the next part in our pattern, but if you're still chaining, I will come back and tell you again, so don't worry. So in our pattern, the next thing that it says is for round, we're going to chain 60, which is what we just did. And then it says join with a slip stitch in the furthest chain from the hook.
Hey, Megan,
Yes.
there was one question that was before that,
Okay.
asking if they want to make it bigger, can they just add more stitches to the chain?
Absolutely. Yep. So 60, working at kind of the tightness that I have when I'm doing my stitches is going to give me about 28 inches in circumference. But if you want yours to be larger or smaller, you can change the number from that 60. But 60 is kind of a good base to start with. All right, here comes a slip stitch. So we have the end of our chain, and you'll see that I have a stitch right here. There's the two parts of the letter V. I'm going to stick my hook through those two parts and basically split that stitch. So the letter V, I'm going to put my hook in between the letter V and split that. And then I'm going to take this yarn and I'm just going to yarn over, which what we were doing before with our chain stitch just means go over under and grab the yarn. And this yarn is going to pull through both of these two loops down here. And that is what's called a slip stitch.
Hey,
And the,
Megan,
yes.
well,
Oh, nope, I can undo.
just show
Show
them
again.
how you hold your yarn one more time in your hand.
Okay. So I'm right-handed. So here's one way to do it. I put my yarn over my pinky, under, over, and around. And what that does is I lift up this pointer finger, and that creates this tension, and I can kind of decide how much yarn to let through my fingers while I'm working. So it's over the pinky, under ring, over middle, and over the top of the pointer. That's one way. Another way I used to do it is if you hold on to your hook and your work with your left hand, you can yarn over by just wrapping around the hook with your right hand. So especially if any of you are left-handed, you can wrap the yarn around and then use your left hand to pull stitches over. So that's kind of another way if you've never really found a comfortable way in order to hold the yarn on your hand. Honestly, I think holding the yarn and getting that under control is one of the hardest parts of crocheting for sure. So take some time and figure that out for yourself. And now this slip stitch one more time, I'm going back to the beginning of the chain. Here's my knot at the beginning of my chain, and here's my letter V. I'm taking the pointy part of the hook and going through that stitch, and then I'm going to yarn over. So here's me taking the hook over under, yarning over, and then I'm going to pull that yarn. So I'm using my thumb to kind of pull this away from my hook so that there's space for the hook to go through and join all of that together. So that was the slip stitch that just joined this whole entire project together. We have our tail, we have our working yarn, and now we have a big circle, which is what we're going to work our cowl into. And there's 60 different stitches going around this circle. So now that we've joined it together, round one says to chain 4, which counts as a double crochet in chain 1. So I want to kind of explain that if you've never really worked with patterns before or you're not sure. What happens with a double crochet, get a pen, is that it looks like, well, here's one I was already drawing. This is kind of what a double crochet stitch ends up looking like. So if you chain 4 or chain 3, it's going to be the same height as a double crochet stitch. So if I tell you to do a double crochet and then chain 1, if we put in a double crochet's worth of chains in a chain 1, it's going to be the same height. So in order to make our cowl grow, we need to add height. So now that we have this circle, we need to figure out how high the circle is going to go by adding a double crochet. And since we can't add a double crochet right away, the next best thing to build the height is going to be to chain 3. So chaining 3 equals 1 double crochet. And in this pattern, we're going to do a double crochet and an extra chain in between each time we do a double crochet. So instead of chaining 3, I'm going to chain 4. And if you don't have a clue what I was just talking about, it is okay. But what I'm trying to tell you is that we're building height. So I want you to chain 4. So the next step in the pattern is to chain 4. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then our pattern tells us to work a double crochet into the first chain. So here's my circle. Here's this height that I'm adding to my cowl. And then here's the first stitch right after what I just did. So I'm going to be putting a double crochet into this stitch right here, right next to the 4 that I just added. So here's how you do a double crochet. So chaining 3 isn't called a double crochet, but chaining 3 gives you the same height as a double crochet stitch. And so right here, when I'm starting this round, I'm chaining 3 to kind of get myself started. And I'll show you that again in just a moment because I think it'll make sense once I add in the double crochet. All right, in order to double crochet, you yarn over, which means I took my hook over under. And then notice how I'm using my pointer finger to kind of hold the yarn against my hook, because then I'm going to take my hook, point inside first, and split one of these chains right next to where I just added those 3. So I pushed that just through that. Let me show you again. I'm holding with my pointer finger. I'm pushing my hook through a chain. I still have this yarn over because I was holding on to it. I'm going to pull this yarn through, and now I have 3 loops. I'm going to yarn over, and this time I'm going to pull the middle 2 off, and then I'm going to yarn over one more time and pull through the bottom 2. And that right there is a double crochet. So notice how our double crochet is as tall as the chain that we made. So that's why we started with that chain, because it makes it the same height. I will definitely repeat that. So you have chained 4, not just 3, but chain 4 because we have an extra chain. And then in order to do a double crochet, you start by yarning over, hold on to that yarn over and go through a stitch right next to where you were. And now you have another yarn over. Then I'm going to take this yarn and I'm going to pull through just this stitch right here. So I'm just going to pull through that stitch. And now I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through the middle 2. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through the bottom 2. And that is a complete double crochet stitch. So if anyone's feeling a little lost or overwhelmed, let me take you to the step-by-step pictures too. So what we did in our step-by-step pictures was we chained 60 and then we joined them together with a slip stitch. And then this is showing you the double crochet. So I chained 4, which is my chain 3 plus an extra little chain stitch. I yarned over, I stuck it through the stitch. I yarned over again, pulled through the middle 2, yarn over again, and pull through the last 2. And then you end up with these 2 chunks, which is your original chain and this double crochet. So hopefully that's going to help you. So someone's asking, are you going to stitch right next to the one that you use with the slip stitch? Yes, that's where I put that first double crochet into, right next to that slip stitch, correct. And then from there, we're going to do a little skipping around. So the next part of the pattern says to skip 2 chains in the next, and then into the next chain, put a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. So let me show you with this, that this is what we're doing. We're going to go all the way around and we're going to be making these little clusters. So these clusters have 2 double crochets that are separated by a chain 1. So we're going to double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. Then we're going to skip 2 spaces. So we're leaving a hole down here. And we're going to do double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. We're going to skip 2 places. And so we're making these little holes in our cowl. And the reason why we're creating those is because then that's going to give us a place to build the next layer when we add more stitches when we go around the circle again. So what we're doing is here's my chain 3, and then I have an extra chain to kind of give me a space to go across, and then a double crochet, and that's my first cluster. Then I'm gonna skip over 2 chains, and when I put the next double crochet down through here, I'm not gonna go in the one right next to it. I'm gonna skip 2 and go into the third one. So I'm leaving that gap. That's what's happening. And then I'm gonna do double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. What I'm showing you in this first round is the whole entire pattern for the cowl. This is all you need to learn how to do. So we'll keep going over it and we'll keep practicing it, but this is all you do. And then you do it again a couple more times to build the height, and that is it. That is the entire cowl. So this is exactly what you need to learn to be able to do this whole entire project. So there's not going to be a bunch more things that I'm going to try and teach you. This is it. This is what we're doing. Okay. So I started with my chain of 4, which is my chain 3, chain 1, and then a double crochet into the space right next to it. Then I'm skipping 2. So here's what I mean about skipping 2. This is where I just left off. I count 1, 2, and my next double crochet needs to go into the 3rd stitch. So you're going to leave 2 stitches alone, and you're going to take the double crochet into the 3rd stitch. So you're like skipping over those 2. So here I go. I'm going to count 1, 2, and into the 3rd stitch. To do a double crochet, you go yarn over, put the hook through that 3rd stitch, and yarn over. So right now I have 4 loops on my yarn, 4 pieces of yarn on my hook. I'm going to take just this second one off. So I'm twisting my hook to keep this one on and taking off the second one. I yarn over again. I'm going to take off the middle 2, and I'm going to yarn over again and take off the bottom 2. So this has made another double crochet, 2 spaces away from the first cluster. And then I'm going to chain 1. And now I'm going to do another double crochet into the exact same space that I was just in. So I yarn over, holding on to my yarn over, hook first into that spot, yarn over and grab some yarn, pull that yarn through just the first loop, yarn over, pull through the middle 2, and yarn over and pull through the bottom 2. And I've just made 2 double crochets separated by 1 chain stitch. So this kind of looks like our first cluster, even though our first cluster was chains and a double crochet. The reason why we did those chains was to get this height going and make it kind of look like the other one, even though it's not exactly the same stitch. Yeah, it is a lot, so we'll keep going, don't worry. So now that I have this, even if you're on the first part again, I can show you using this next part. I count 1, 2, and into the 3rd stitch is where I'm going to put my next double crochet. So my next double crochet starts with a yarn over. I'm holding on to my pointer. I'm going hook first into that 3rd stitch, and then I'm going to grab some more yarn. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of yarn on my hook. The next part, I'm just going to be taking off the second hook, the second loop. So I'm twisting my hook a little bit to go through and just take off that first one. Now I yarn over, and I'm about to take off the middle 2. And then I yarn over and take off the bottom 2. So that's 1 double crochet. And then you're going to chain 1. And then you're going to do another double crochet into that exact same space that I was working in. So here comes another double crochet, yarn over. I'm holding on to it, going hook first into that same space I was in, and yarning over again, which means now there's 4 pieces of yarn on my hook. I'm going to take off just this first loop, so twisting my hook in order to get just that first loop off, yarning over, taking off the middle two and yarning over and taking off the bottom two. So now I have my third cluster. Here's my first cluster, then I skip two. Here's my next cluster, I skip two, and here's my next cluster, which means I'm going to keep skipping two and put my next cluster into the third stitch. So 1, 2, and into the third stitch is going to be the next double crochet where you yarn over, hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull off just the top one, yarn over, middle two, and yarn over, bottom two. So we are going to put this onto YouTube as soon as we can. As soon as the class is over, I'm going to try and put it onto the Michael's YouTube channel so that you can see this again. Yeah, just a little bit more practice, but once you get the hang of what we're doing right now with the clusters, I think it's going to make a lot more sense. And then you're going to find that the rest of it is just repeating the same thing over and over again. I'm going to chain one. You won't necessarily get a message when it goes on YouTube, but I will put it on social media. So if you follow Learn with Michaels or me, which is the number 4M Coleman on Instagram, I'll have those links available for you. So with this one, I'm going into the same spot. I chained one, and I'm going to go into that spot, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, middle two, yarn over, bottom two. Yep, Felicia can put that Instagram information into the chat for you. And we will get that video to you as soon as we can. I'm going to keep going with my clusters. Ask questions because I'd love to try and explain it another way if you're still struggling. But we're working on the same cluster, so even if you're back at the beginning, still working on your first cluster, try and ask a question so I can maybe explain it again in a different way. And those of you who are kind of doing okay, just know that you should keep going with this process of creating these double crochets and then chain one and then another double crochet into the same spot. And we are just going to create a whole entire loop of these clusters. And that's what we're going to build on for our next round. So be patient with yourself. It looks like you are doing well. Just keep trying. Don't give up. Let me know if there's anything I can help with. And for those of you who have crocheted before, this is going to be a pretty fast and easy pattern for you. Forgot to chain one. To be able to make this cozy cowl in probably just about an hour and a half. So I did a double crochet, chain one, double crochet. I know, I missed the in-store classes too. 1, 2, skip one. Yes, I can come closer to show the skipping. That's just where I'm at. So here's where I just put stuff into, right here, into this space. So here's a V right here, that's 1. And here's a letter V right here, that's 2. So I'm going into the third one. So this is the space right here that I'm going to try and go into. I skipped 1, 2, and into the third one is what I'm doing. It doesn't really matter if your stitches are not quite the same size right now because you're definitely probably having a good first try at this. So now that I went into that stitch, I yarn over to have all 4. I'm pulling this yarn through this loop right here, just through that one. Yarning over, pulling through middle 2, yarning over, pulling through bottom 2. I chain 1 to separate my double crochets, and I go into the exact same spot I was, yarn over, pull off 1, yarn over, middle 2, yarn over, bottom 2. So slip hand it, slip knot, yes, and left hand it. Yeah, so there is a good, I have the pattern, which is kind of written in Crochet Ease, which has all the little symbols and all the letters and things like that. But if you're not a classic crocheter, if you're just kind of starting out, What I do in this step-by-step version is I take the words, so this says DC, chain one, DC, and I tell you what that means. So in here I say to work a double crochet, chain one. So I kind of explain or translate that language into language that you might understand a little bit better. So feel free to check out this guide. And it has some close-up pictures too that you might be able to see better on the pictures where that space is in between that you're trying to get to, and that might help you as well. So I'm going to get around my whole entire thing, and feel free to keep asking questions and let me know what's going on with your work. And then once we finish this whole entire round, I'm going to show you where you add your next round, and that's pretty much going to be everything you need to know in order to do the whole entire cowl. So we're on the right track. I'm just making these clusters by going into the third stitch, skipping two and going into the third stitch and doing my double crochet, chain one, double crochet. And I'm so glad so many of you have joined us today. Taking the time to learn this new hobby can be tough at first. Skip two, go into the third stitch. Chain one, and another double crochet. Chain one. And what's nice about that cluster is the reason why we're putting that chain one in between the double crochets in the same spot is because that's creating another little space. And that little space in between the double crochets where we have our chain one is where we're going to put our next row of stitches to build up the height of your cowl. If you're finding some success and you're feeling pretty good about this, we do have other classes. I had a class recently where I taught how to crochet a pumpkin. So if you really want to challenge, or if you feel like you're starting to get the hang of things and you want to keep up leveling yourself, you can try and make an amigurumi, which means it's a 3D crochet piece. And that's a crochet pumpkin. That class is available on our Michael's YouTube channel. Also coming up tomorrow, I have a totally different craft called punch needle. So punch needle uses yarn, but in a very, very different way. And if you're feeling frustrated with crochet, that punch needle class might be for you because you literally get to punch things into fabric over and over again. So if you're feeling frustrated, maybe punch needle is the right craft for you. So consider that. I love punch needle. It's very calming to be able to stab yarn into fabric. And if I feel like we're getting short on time, I'll run over to another piece I have already started, but I think we're okay for now on time. And if you are able to follow along with us and create something, I would love for you to share a picture. You can share a picture in chat here today with me, or you can, if you have social media, if you have Instagram, you can tag us at Learn with Michaels. I don't teach a Tunisian crochet yet, but if that's something we're interested in, maybe we can try that. So yeah, punch needle, crochet, embroidery, all of those hobbies are hobbies that probably your grandparents did, and they are definitely back and better than ever nowadays. So learning these skills, they never really go away. There's always a new twist on them. Oops. I love this color yarn that I'm working with. I just love these colors in here. So pretty. Yes, for Tunisian crocheting. Okay, I'm gonna have to do some homework. Gonna have to do some homework and get a class ready for you. I'm getting pretty close. Needle felting. Okay, now we're coming up with some more ideas in the chat for things you want to learn about. There are so many good holiday classes coming up because, oh my goodness, there's so many crafts to make. I'm also going to teach some classes in December about floral arrangements. So I used to work at a flower shop when I was in high school. I loved it. And so we are going to make some different holiday floral arrangements. And these floral arrangements have definitely saved me in the past, where if I'm running out the door and invited to some party or some holiday get together, it's so nice to be able to throw some floral into a vase and have a beautiful present or gift for whoever is hosting the event. I know, I'm glad I purchased this color too. I'm just in love with it. So we don't have any, I don't have any knitting classes yet, but there are knitting classes available on our Michael's YouTube channel. So maybe we can all learn together. I have to watch those videos too. So there's a question in the chat that says, for each cluster, do you separate it with a single crochet? You separate the double crochets with a chain one, but you do not do extra chains going from cluster to cluster. Wet felting? I don't think I've ever even heard of that. That sounds amazing. So right now I finished a cluster. I have a double crochet, chain one, double crochet, and I'm not doing any extra chains. I'm just starting my double crochet in the third stitch. So I'm going into the third stitch and doing my next double crochet. So that chain one is only happening in between the double crochets. It's not happening in between the clusters. That's a really great question. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm getting close. Hopefully you are too. I think I have 2 more clusters and then I'm done with my circle. And I'll show you how to add on to the next round. Okay, so I'm at the point in my cowl where I'm starting to get a little twisted. Straighten that back out for myself. And so I have 3, I think about 3 chains left that don't have anything before I get to the beginning. So I am going to do one more cluster right up close next to this first one. So I'm going to yarn over and go into the chain closest to where I first started, breaking that stitch with my hook. And if you don't have the exact number right here, you can leave a little bit of a gap and just do your last stitch if you don't have the perfect number left. And it will have a little bit of a hole, but honestly, it'll get hidden by the other holes that are in the cowl. So don't worry if you don't have the exact number of stitches left right there. So I did a double crochet, chain one, and then my next double crochet, and that finishes this entire round. Voila! And I have created this beautiful collar. And right now the collar is not joined because here's where it started and here's where it ended. So we're going to join that collar together using a slip stitch. And then from there, we are going to start building the next round, and you will have all the information you need in order to complete your cowl. So here's how you join your cowl. And I'll show you in the pattern too, that it says that you join with a slip stitch in the starting chain from the beginning round in the third chain up to close the round. So remember how our very first part after our chain of circle was to chain 4? Remember when we did the chain 4? So we have 1, 2, 3, and then we have a chain 1 because all the clusters, remember, have that chain 1. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to you now that we've kind of seen what we've been doing. So the reason why I did 4 stitches to begin was to have my chain 3, which equals the same height as my double crochet, and then to add an extra chain, the 4th chain, in order to go across here. So in order to join, we're going to count up 1, 2, 3, and in the 3rd chain, we're going to put a slip stitch, which means we're splitting the stitch with our hook. We're going to yarn over, and we're going to take both of those off. And that is the slip stitch that joins both of those off and joins the circle together. Very good. Okay, so now what happens is we need to start the next round. And you can imagine, just like we started the first round, we started the first round with chaining 4. We're going to start this next round by chaining 4 also. So we're going to chain 4. Now that we've joined it, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, in the clusters, you have the chain 1 separating the 2 double crochets. We're going to be doing the double crochets into that space. So I have my chain 4, and now I'm going to go into the space in between the double crochets. So hook first into the space. So I have a whole bunch of stitches, not just a yarn right there. I yarn over because I'm doing my double crochet, pull through all those stitches, yarn over, pull through the middle 2, yarn over, pull through the bottom 2. So now I have my chain 3, 1 chain, double crochet. Now, where we're putting these is going to be in between the clusters. You're going to see spaces that go in between one cluster to another. We're not going to be going into these big spaces. We're going to be going into the chain 1 space that's in between the 2 double crochets. So I want you to kind of see that, because once you kind of understand that, the rest is going to make sense. So here's a space in between the clusters, but here's the space in between the double crochets. Space in between the clusters is much bigger. Space in between the double crochets is much smaller. So we're going to keep doing that double crochet, chain, double crochet, but we're going to be putting it into where our last cluster was. So here comes my next stitch. I'm going to show you where it goes. Yarning over to start my double crochet, and my double crochet is going to go in the chain 1 space in between the 2 double crochet stitches. So when I yarn over, I have a ton of stuff on my hook right now. I'm going to pull through, and then I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to pull through the middle 2, and I'm going to yarn over, pull through the bottom 2. Then I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet into that exact same space again. Double crochet into that same space. And I have my second cluster, starting my second round. I did see in the chat someone wants to see the slip stitch again, and I'll absolutely show that to you. So I want you to see where you're going next. So this is a big hole in between the clusters. That's not where you're going. You're going into the smaller hole that's in between the 2 double crochets. So this is the spot I'm going for in between those 2 double crochets with my next cluster. Into that cluster with 1 double crochet, chain 1, into that cluster with a second double crochet, and that's it. Then I jump to the next cluster. So remember how on the first round we were skipping 2? We're kind of skipping 2 again because we're skipping over this stuff, but we're going into the space that goes in between the double crochets each time. And we chain 1, and we go through that space with the double crochets again. And that is the entire process of making this cowl. So I did see the question about showing the join again, and I can do that for you. So if you're at this point right here, where you did your first round of all these different clusters onto your original chain, then in order to join this kind of collar-like situation together, I'm gonna need, here we go. So once I finish that last cluster, you count up 1, 2, 3, and into the third chain is where you're gonna join. So I count 1, 2, 3, I put my hook through that third stitch, and I yarn over and go through both of them at the same time, and that's how you do a slip stitch. And that just join that together. And then remember when I started the second round, you need to give it some height. So the reason why I need to do some chains is to give it height. I do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to go into the space in between these double crochets with a double crochet. And the very first cluster, each time you start a round, is made up of some chains and a double crochet. So the first cluster is always going to be a little bit different than the rest. And then from there, I'm going to go in between, in the space in between the chain 1 of each set of double crochets. So you might be able to see it a little different with this green color. So notice those big gaps are in between the clusters. The small gap that we're trying to go for is in between the 2 double crochets. So Felicia, you want to tell people as we're wrapping up about how to save some of this information?
I sure can. So, as Megan was mentioning, if you would like to keep a copy of the chat so that you can have access to the links, if you are on a computer or a laptop, that I do know for sure, you can click on the 3 dots in the chat section and click Save Chat, and you'll be able to keep up with all the information that was provided during the class. I'm not exactly for sure. I don't believe you can do that from a cell phone, but definitely from a computer or a laptop or desktop, some type of a desktop. You can be able to keep the chat.
Yes.
If you have any additional questions, definitely put that in the chat and I will try to answer as I can.
And as soon as we wrap up together, we're going to send this video off to our partners, and they're going to put it onto the Michaels YouTube channel. So if you wait just a little bit and come back to the Michaels YouTube channel, if you got lost, or if you need to come back to how to do a join or any of the things in between each one of the sections, you can do that. And just to show you the final bit, so I have kind of 3 works in progress right now, but here's me coming towards the final end of this one. And this is my beginning chain 4. So I have just a couple more clusters to go. And then once you get to the end of the cluster, after you've done as many rounds as you think, about 6 inches high is usually a really nice size cowl. Then you do the one last join, just like we've been doing, where remember your first stitch has 3 chains. It has a chain 3. So you join the last stitch you make in this third stitch with a join with a slip stitch. And then when you're done with your slip stitch, so let's pretend like I just did that, you can give yourself a little bit of a tail, and you're going to pull your yarn through that last stitch and make it nice and tight. That makes a little knot right there, nice and tight. And then you can take your hook, or you can take your a needle, and you can weave in the ends, which means kind of go through some of your different stitches and grab that yarn and pull that extra bit of tail through some different stitches so that you can kind of hide it in your work and kind of give yourself more security with that extra bit of tail. And then when you get to a certain place where you feel pretty good and that your tail is nice and secure, you can go ahead and cut that down. And all of that is hidden. So with that last bit with joining at the very end, you will have the same height come together just like we did at the end of the collar. And so you just do a slip stitch to connect this side of your work to this side of your work. Pull your yarn through, make that knot, and then weave that end in, and you will have your own beautiful cowl. And I can't wait to see what cowls you are able to create. And please share with us on Learn with Michaels on our Instagram. Let us know if you were able to do this. We'll get that video to you as soon as possible. Do save those PDFs. If you don't get a chance to grab the PDFs right now during the live class, they will be linked underneath the YouTube video as well. So it looks like some of you have some works in progress. I'm proud of that. That is not easy to do, but look at you. You're doing it, knocking it out. So a little bit longer, and I bet you're going to have this beautiful scarf to be able to wear all season long. So yeah, you're on your way. You'll get there. Don't worry. Don't panic. You're on the way. All right. It was good to see you. I hope you come back and we have another class again soon. Bye, everyone.